Hi folks, and welcome to part 2 of looking at the Wampler Triumph overdrive. Now, part 1 was just on the clean channel of the Bugera and letting you hear the voicing of the pedal and not trying to go into too much depth and detail, but letting you hear the full kind of sonic range that it did. Today, this is all high gain. This is all home turf. This is all trying to better my Boss SD1. That's my go-to. Now, before going any further, please could you like and subscribe? That makes a huge odds to me. I've gained 100 subscribers in the last month, which is phenomenally good. But the more the merrier. Anyway. Story of this so far is I have my Jet City, which is a Chinese made Soldano Hotrod 50 plus. It's an amazing amp live. It's cutting, it's got so much gain. However, in the room, I have this still fairly loud, but in the room, that amplifier lacks an awful lot of low end. It's great once you get it up to gig volume. Then everything comes alive and you're in absolute glorious tone. However, in the room, like I say, it really lacks low end. I have the presence actually backed off to about 9 o'clock to kind of tame some of that top end that it has as well. And it's also going into a Harley Benton 4x12 with Celestian Vintage 30s, which again are quite punchy and bright. Ideally, I would like to get something like Celestian Greenbacks. That would work really well with that amplifier. But at the moment, that's what it's using. I've compared it with my Laney IRT 4x12, which makes it sound even fizzier. However, the Laney works beautifully with the Bugera. So I'll let you hear both amps and we'll have the pedal doing both contexts. So this could go on for, 20 minutes, 25 minutes again. I'm good at rambling on for that length of time. So, guitar, Kramer Pacer. I'm completely in home turf here. Seymour Duncan JB in the bridge, tuned to D. This is my main gigging standard guitar. So, just to let you hear, we have quite a lot of gain. No effects, because the effects loop in the Jet City is absolutely abysmal anyway, so it needs line level rack gear to work properly. So here we have my dry, crunchy overdrive sound that I would normally use in this room. It really doesn't need more gain. Now, I'm going to pan down, let you look at the pedal, and we'll control it from there. So, 2 seconds. Okay, here we are again with the pedal and my left knee again. So, the first thing I will say is, unlike the Boss SD1, which I'll just grab and show you my settings. I'll put it there. As you see, I have the level full up. I have the gain at about 9 o'clock and the tone is just backed off a touch. Now, unlike the Boss, the level, the volume in this is huge. Parity with the amp is about there. So that is more than enough, I've found, to hit the front of the amp. Any more than that, and you really are slamming it so hard, you would send a low gain amp. In fact, we might do that at some point. I'll turn the gain right down and let you hear this doing 90% of the lifting. However, here we have my main crunch tone in the Jet City. So this is a kind of Soldano-y, squidgy overdrive. I'm more of an 80s. So plenty gain. So all I'm really wanting to do here is tone shape, because I've only got the gain on the amp and about halfway anyway. I'm not going to push it any harder. So here we go. I'm in punch mode because, again, I'll cut to the chase. I've found punch works really well as the boost. So So that's it, pretty much straight up EQ. That amount of gain is enough, because this actually, when I turn it right down, has less gain than the SD1, but it also has much more gain at the other end of the extreme. So there seems to work nicely. But what I do like, unlike the SD1, is having the bass control. Because in the room, if I'm just practicing or playing at room volume, the Jet City can sound a little bit thin. So that amount of bass just fills in. Now, if I'm playing live, I would have to back that back off. But we'll do the SD1 kind of tube screamer thing and just bump those mids up a touch. Let you hear that off. So as you hear, it's adding more intensity, but I'm not losing the low end in the room. This you have to adjust, like I said before. As your volume increases, you'll need to back that off. However, this is where the Triumph for me is beginning to beat the SD1. Is at any volume I'm able to dial in the sound I want. Now, for comparison, the smooth side has got less gain and more mids, and a little less top end. So we'll just do a comparison. Now, the smooth mode works really well if you're playing lead lines. However, this is where I find this will be very handy dependent on your amp, because the Soldano circuit, as you may be aware, is a very smooth overdrive. It's very singing. It's tons of sustain, but it lacks bite, real bite. It is an older style amp. It's more of a late 80s amp. So smooth overdrives going into a smooth high gain amp just makes things extra buttery, extra smooth. I'm not selling you some kind of dairy produce here, but it doesn't work quite as well. And that's why I never favoured a tube screamer with the Jet City. I always preferred the clipping circuit of the SD1. It just had that little bit of grit and a little bit, just seemed to cut through, more harmonically rich. And again, this is where I find the punch circuit works better. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same as the SD1, obviously, because you've got so much EQ control. However, I would say if I have that dialed to about there, that would be very similar to how I set my SD1 sonically. But in the room, I'm going to bump the bass up, and if I wanted, I could send that ridiculously high. So, as you hear, having that bass control gives you a huge amount of options. Anyway, that's enough for that. I'm going to back the gain right off on the Jet City. The gain is now set at 2, so it's barely on. I'll maybe even take it down a touch more. 1. So you can see how much gain that channel has got. That's it practically off. So I'll play it. And now if I want, I can whack the level up rather than changing anything else. And that will really hit those tubes hard. But we do lose something. If I put it into smooth mode, believe it or not, in smooth mode, with the volume higher, is beginning to sound closer to how the amp would normally sound. Beginning to get that bit spongy, a bit woolly sounding. However, it gets a bit noisy. So, for me, I'm still happier having about 50% drive on the amp and just having this almost as a tone shape with a slight boost. And that works great. And this is where I would be quite happy to play all day. So it does that. Right. Switch that off. And I will quickly take the cable out, pop it into the Bugera, into the crunch channel. Again, no effects. You'll hear that a very different sounding amp. Much less open, much tighter. This is a much more modern sounding amp. The gain in this is about 1 o'clock, so it has a lot less gain than the Jet City, but I only tend to use the crunch channel. And here, if I use the exact same settings as the Jet City, it works, but it's a little bit boxy. So I would take off the bass, kick up the treble, and I'm still in punch mode, and I won't bother touching the volume and the gain, because you really don't, well, I really don't want to hit the amp super hard. I want to just shape what I've got and just add a bit of flavour. That could maybe get hit a bit harder. And you've got to remember, I'm also using different cabs here, but I tended to go for the cab that suited the amplifier and then work my overdrives around that. So as you hear, that's still a little bit boxier than the actual Jet City would be, but it's a different amp, different sound. I put it in smooth mode there, so smooth mode and gun the treble a bit more. Increase the gain a touch, and we should be getting something closer. Believe it or not, that's actually better. It's still better in punch, even with the Bugera. Just gives a clarity, takes away some of that boxiness, and here we have quite an unusual kind of EQ setting. Yes, I've cut the bass a lot with this. Much more low end in this amp. The mid's kind of the same. Any higher and it begins to get really boxy sounding, and I've boosted the top end. The treble in this amp is about halfway, and the presence is also halfway, so you can tell that's a much darker sounding amplifier than the Jet City. But a more modern voicing, so if you're down tuned or playing more modern metal, this does that, I would say, better. The Jet City is my go-to because I tend to play in a more of an 80s hairband style. Hairband. No, you know what I mean. try is cut the gain right off and use this as you would normally use a tube screamer type circuit in an amp like this. Oh, no, that's getting too... You can almost hear the valves bouncing at that. There's too much signal going into it. So be conservative with that volume knob. Don't gun it. It's not like having an SD1 where you just crank the level right up. This you've really got to be careful with. And just a touch above the parity volume. Find where this is equaling your guitar volume, going straight into the amp. So off and on volume the same in a clean setting. And then I would end up marking just with a bit of tape where the equal volume would be, and then give it a slight nudge up. But I know from trying this out, around the 11 o'clock mark is more than enough level to hit your amp. Okay, I'll switch this off, and sound wise I think we've covered enough. I'm not going to bother going through leads. You know, lead tones with this will work equally well. And I'll do a little summary and speak to you face to face in a second. So bear with me. And okay, I can't find the little remote control to switch on and off the camera. So in conclusion, I think for this year, this will be my go-to overdrive. I can't fault the SD1, I've used it forever. However, when it comes to versatility and playing assorted venues, and we'll be sometimes playing outdoors, sometimes playing halls, sometimes playing bars, it's potluck. This wins, not because it's any better on any individual tone. You know, the sound of an SD1, I can plug in, whack it on, and I'm pretty much there. And I know what it's going to do. This will take a little bit more tweaking, but it has that option. Like I said, there are more dip switches in there. I've not found a need to go into them. I don't need the smooth side to be brighter, and I certainly don't need the punch side to have any more clarity. I tend to use this as a boost into high gain, as you heard. The way this interacts with the Jet City is what wins for me. So if you've got a creamy high gain amp, like a Soldano, like a Jet City, then that in the punch cuts away some of that creamy edge and gives it a little bit more of a modern voicing without it being super... It doesn't do that, but it gets you much closer. It's certainly not adding more smoothness on top of a smooth amp, because you set it to punch and you set your EQ accordingly. The beauty of it is, if you've got something like a Plexi style amp, that in the room at lower volumes, in fact a Plexi in most bar volumes, you're still going to be incredibly bright, because of, I think it's like a bright cap, and it's only once you're by a certain level it gets disengaged. Having this bass control in your overdrive hitting that amp will let you get a warmer, beefier sound at lower volume. So at home you can have a setting. at home volume you have a setting, and then as you get louder and louder and louder, you can back off the bass, and then it does everything. So yeah, Mr. Wampler, you have done really well. I love this. When I first got it, it was a little bit of option paralysis. I was just, oh good grief, that doesn't quite sound like what I wanted. That doesn't, I need to sit and work on this and get the EQ just right. But the EQ will get you just right. And that's where it wins. There's only so much you can do with a tone pot. Whereas bass, middle and treble, you can dial this into whatever amp you have. And these two are chalk and cheese in how they sound. These cabinets are very, very different. It's actually giving me the idea of trying this pedal in the Jet City into the Laney cabinet. So whether that works better now, it's opening up a whole world of combinations. So 110 euros, around £100, I think they're $99 in the USA. Definitely. Because an SD1, great pedal. The SD1 is maybe slightly heavier and will outlive cockroaches in the Armageddon times. However, a bit more limited. And these in Europe are now over 70 euros. A couple of years ago they were 40 odd, 50 euros, and it was a no-brainer, just get one. I still say get one because they are absolutely brilliant pedals. However, for the sake of 30 or 40 euros, that's giving you more options. It's giving you some Tube Screamer options with the smooth mode, and if you find that's too dark, you flick the little dip switch and it adds this glass, this top end. It's more of a presence, and there's a kind of EQ shift over the whole thing. However, you have that. You have the punch, and then you've got the powerful EQ, and the EQ is horrendously powerful in a good way. It's just got so much low end, so much mid-range. You know, when I turned that up on the clean sound, when I was just using this as an overdrive, it really did send you into almost that Michael Schenker Courtois sound. It was so pronounced, the mid-range. Your top end, very, very controllable. Having the smooth and punch options, more volume level than you could ever dream of. Like I say, that's a huge amount of level. The fact that it's not even halfway and I'm hitting these amps really, really hard. So again, if you have a very low gain amp, a Plexi style, or even a JCM 800 isn't super high gain. People seem to get the wrong idea there. This will be amazing in that. You've got more gain if you want it, but in this context I've really used very little gain. Yeah, that's the one for me. And I've got the SD1, I've got the Crayon, I've got Mojo, I've got the Golden Horse there, I've got umpteen built into multi-effects that are really good, the Digitech Redline type, amp driver. That's the business. Simple to use. Once you're subtle with the controls, subtle with the EQ, you will dial that into anything. So I very rarely would say I 100% recommend a thing because there's so many choices. But this has so many choices and so many variances that I will say yes. I recommend the Wampler Triumph. It is a complete triumph. It's great. It comes with a nice little bag. So thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. I hope I've covered most of what you're looking for a high gain context. And I'll have something for you again quite soon. I'm beginning to run out of gear again. I need more Christmases. So, bye-bye.